Let me guess, you have found yourself here watching this video because you want to learn everything there is to know about all of the different Cricut blades. Well, let me just go ahead and tell you that you are in the right place because I'm going to give you the ultimate guide to all of your Cricut blades and explain what each and every one does or does not do. My name is Lauren and I'm a craft producer here at Makers Gonna Learn, where we love to bring you inspiration, education, and motivation to not only get your Cricut out, but to learn everything there is to know and actually get value out of the investment that you have already made. If you are new to our channel, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell notification so that you can get notified every time we get crafty. So let's go ahead and start talking about Cricut blades. First up on the list is going to be your fine point blade. Now this blade is going to be one that you're going to use 90 to 95% of the time. It's going to cut the majority of materials that you are going to want to use with your Cricut. Now let's go overhead and really dive deep into what the fine point blade is and how it works. Here is exactly what the fine point blade is. Now, to change out your fine point blade and for us to get a closer look, if you press the top right here, you can see that it retracts that blade. So this is a 45-degree angle blade, and this blade is going to cut, like I said, the majority of the material that you are going to want to use with your Cricut. It is an absolutely amazing blade. There's really not much else to say with it other than this is going to be your most used blade. Now to change out, like I said, what you're gonna do, press down here on the top, it pulls that out. You're then going to take that, remove your blade, and then it's magnetic in there, so when you put it back in, you will hear a faint click, and then you'll just release and you're good to go. Now the next two blades that I want to talk about are going to be your premium fine point blade and your bonded fabric blade. Now these two blades are in a gold and a pink housing. Guys, I just want to be completely honest with you. These are pretty much glorified fine point blades. Now, the premium blade is going to be made of tungsten steel, so it may stay sharper longer. But other than that, this is just a premium fine point blade. Now the fabric blade, bonded fabric blade, is literally just a fine point blade in a pink housing. That way you keep it separate from your regular blade. So I want you guys to think of the analogy, would you ever use your fabric scissors to cut paper? If you're a true crafter, you know that that is a cardinal sin. So this is just a 45-degree angle blade that stays in a pink housing to coordinate with the pink fabric mat. That way you can keep them separate so you can cut paper with your regular fine point blade, change that out as often. But with this means that you only cut bonded fabric with this blade, so it just stays sharper a little bit longer. Now, like I said, that's really the only difference. The premium blade, if you purchase it through Cricut, is going to be made out of tungsten steel. And like I said, this is just a 45-degree angle fine point blade in a pink housing, so you can keep them separate. Next up on the list is our deep point blade. Now, this one works just like our fine point blade with the top, the retractable blade that comes in and out. The difference between your deep point blade and your fine point blade is this blade is a 60-degree angle blade, meaning that it gets a deeper cut. Because it has a sharper angle blade, it's going to get a deeper cut. So if you purchase replacement blades, know that you do have to put the 60-degree angle blade in your deep point housing. That is what a deep point blade is for. This blade is specifically designed to cut thicker materials such as thicker cardstock, craft foam, magnetic sheets, and so many other things. So this is a great blade to keep in your arsenal. Now, one more thing, this retracts and goes in just like a regular fine point blade. So If you're getting technical, you really could put a 60-degree angle blade in your fine point housing. However, I don't suggest that, strictly because if you're anything like me, I forget a lot of times to change it back, like I get in a rush. So there's a good chance that you're gonna leave a deep point blade in a fine point housing and the angle is not enough for, I feel like, you to be able to tell by the naked eye. Sometimes you can, but it is harder to tell. So I would still suggest purchasing the black housing to keep your deep point blade in, just so you can keep them separate. The next blade that I want to talk about is not even really a blade, but more like an accessory tool that can be used in both Explorer Series and Maker Series machines, and it is called the foil transfer tool. Now, this tool does come with 3 different tips on it. Once again, it works just like your fine point blade with the push button at the top, and then it's magnetic on the inside, so you put in whichever foil transfer tip you want. Now, there is a difference between the 3, and I'm going to try to show you guys. I don't know if you can see it, but one of them has a singular line on it, meaning it's not as deep of a foil. Then you have a medium, which has 2 little lines on it, and then finally you have the deepest one, which has 3 lines on it. All of these are great to use the foil transfer sheets onto cardstock and other things. And like I said, this is one that can be used with both the Maker Series machine and the Explorer. Now, I want you guys to know that the 5 blades or tools that we just talked about are compatible with both the Explorer Series machine and the Maker Series machine. If you all were not aware, the Maker Series machine, the housing does have the ability to have adaptive tools. So there are a few more blades that are compatible with the Maker Series that are not compatible with the Explorer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into all of those adaptive tools and explain to you when you can use those and with what materials, and talk about those that are specifically for the Maker Series machine. Here you can see we have all of the different adaptive tools laid out, but let's talk about the ones that we personally use the most. So first up is the knife blade. Now, out of all of the adaptive tools, I would say that we use the knife blade the most. This blade is kind of like having an X-Acto knife for your Cricut, and it can be used with a lot thicker material such as basswood, balsa wood, chipboard, and things like that. So we don't use it a whole lot, but we use it enough to justify having it in our office and for our Maker Series machine. So one other thing I want to make sure you guys know is we know that we have to calibrate for print and cut, but did you know that you also need to calibrate for your knife blade as well? So if you've never used a knife blade in your machine, I highly suggest a calibration on your knife blade before you start cutting, because if you cut with a knife blade, it's going to do multiple passes and it's going to take a while. So be aware, you do need to calibrate before you use it for the first time. The next most used adaptive tool here in our office is going to be the rotary blade. Now, the rotary blade is great for our friends who plan on cutting a lot of fabric. So if you are someone who likes to sew, quilt, things like that, if you have not gotten a machine, go ahead, get you a Maker Series machine, because you will be cutting fabric and this rotary blade is going to be a very, very important adaptive tool to have on hand. Another thing that is very good to note, okay, the knife blade specifically, let's put this down. The knife blade, you can purchase replacement blades and you can replace this, but I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. We never have. And honestly, when we were looking at the replacement blades, what we found were the replacement blades were still $23, and you could just buy a whole new blade and housing for like $24 or $25. So, like I said, you can replace this blade inside the knife blade. We have not. We haven't used it that much to have to. Plus, if and when we did, we would just go ahead and purchase the whole new housing and blade. So remember how I said that the rotary blade and the knife blade were stationary? These next adaptive tools that I'm going to be showing you are actually what they call a quick swap housing. So much like the fine point blade, there is a button on the top that you would press. So this housing is all together, but the tips are what are interchangeable. So you press the blade, and you can see when the blade is not being pressed, I cannot take that bottom part off. So you can press the top, take that bottom half off, and you have all of these different options for your quick swap housing. So starting out, and we'll actually go in order. I don't know if you guys can see, this one says number 1 on it right there. This is the single scoring wheel. Now, we don't use this a ton. If we want a really, really good score, the scoring wheel is great for that. Normally, we keep our scoring stylus in our machine just because we don't have to stop, change it out, put the fine point blade back in, all that stuff. So it is possible to still use the scoring stylus with your maker, but this is the actual adaptive tool if you want to get a super deep score. We do like using the scoring wheel if we want to get a really deep score. Now, like I said, this one is number 1, so let's swap that out and we'll go to the next one, which if you can see right there says number 2. So that is going to be your double scoring wheel. So that's going to give you a double score. That will go on the quick swap housing like that. Y'all, I'm going to be honest, we don't use the double scoring wheel very often. It is good to have if you want to keep it on hand, but we don't use it very often. The next one that I want to talk to you guys about is going to be number 11, if you guys can see that right there on the end of that blade, number 11. This is going to be your perforation blade. So this is going to be great for those who are paper crafters, big time paper crafters. You can create a lot of things with perforated edges to tear off later. Lots of crafts you can do with this. We do so many other things. I'm not saying, we have used it before. It's not one that I pick up quite often, but it is a good one to have on hand. But this is just going to give you the option to have perforated edges so that you can tear things off of cards and stuff later on. So that's number 11, the perforation tip for your quick swap housing. Next up is number 21. See that right there on the end right here, number 21. This is the debossing tip. What this does is adds dimension to your craft project by creating a depression. So much like your foiling tip, you can use a foiling tip to get a similar effect as the debossing tool. If I was needing something with a depression, I would personally use the foiling tool anyway because there's just not much of a raised tip to this. So I've always used the foiling tool anyway if I need like a depression in a project. Next up is number 31. You can see it right here. And this is the wavy blade. Now, what this does is it just cuts wavy lines in your cardstock. I have personally never used this blade. I'm sure it's a really cool blade. I have just never used it. I'm sure it gives a really nice, beautiful effect on the edges of your cardstock. But the last one, number 31, for the interchangeable quick swap housing is going to be 31, and that's the wavy blade. Now, last but certainly not least is tip number 41. You can see there, tip number 41, and that is the engraving tip. Y'all, this has a very sharp edge on it. Once again, this is with the quick swap housing. This is tip number 41. It is the engraving tip, and out of all of the quick swap housing ones, we have used the engraving tip the most. You can engrave on thin acrylic, you can engrave on leather. There's so many different things on metal. You can do so much with this engraving tip. If you don't have any of the tips for the quick swap housing and you are curious which one to purchase, I personally would go with the engraving tip. I feel like there are just so many possibilities with this tip for the quick swap housing. So What do you think? Those are all of the different blades that can be used in either an Explorer or a Maker Series machine. Once again, I want to reiterate that the last half of the blades that we talked about, which are the ones that are the adaptive tools, can only be used in a Maker Series machine. They are not compatible with an Explorer, but y'all, like I said earlier, 90 to 95% of what you are going to cut with your machine is going to be cut with the fine point blade and maybe even the deep point blade. All of the other stuff is just extra, and those projects are honestly few and far between. Now, I love having the ability to have those different tools at my fingertips if I need them, but if you're just in the market looking for a machine that's going to cut your standard vinyl, cardstock, HTV, things like that, you can't go wrong with an Explorer Series machine that has the fine point blade, deep point blade, and all of those others. Now, if you purchase replacement blades, I want to make sure you guys know and understand, especially the ones linked down below, which are our favorite. The ones that come with the red cap are going to be your 45-degree angle fine point blade. Those need to go in your fine point housing. Normally, if it has a blue cap on it, that's going to be a 60-degree angle deep point blade. That goes in your black housing. Now, you're going to find that some of the replacement blades also have blades that have a yellow tip on those. Those are actually going to be like extra fine point blades that have a 30-degree angle, so it's less than a fine point blade, and they are made to cut thinner material like tissue paper and things like that. Now, we've never used the 30-degree angle blade, but no, they are there at your fingertips. You can use them to cut thinner materials, but we don't ever really use them. Now, before I leave you guys, I want to do a quick troubleshooting if you're having issues with your blade cutting, some steps that you need to take to ensure you have the best cut possible every single time. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to check your blade and make sure there is no debris around your blade. You can even take it out, make sure there's no debris in your housing, and you can clean your blade. You do actually need to clean your blade, especially if you're cutting paper. A lot of times there will be fibers left in and around your blade that will hinder your cuts for other projects. So your first step is checking your blade to make sure that it is clean. The next thing that you need to do is make sure that it is down in the housing all the way. Sometimes what we do is we put it down in clamp B, and you can see there is space here between our clamp and the top of our housing. So you definitely need to make sure that that is all the way down in your housing, and then close your clamp. After doing both of those things, if you're still having issues, another thing you need to try is your pressure in design space. So you need to change it from default pressure to more if you're still having issues cutting. And then finally, if you've done all of those things I just talked about, you need to change your blade. Now, I get the question quite often, Lauren, when do I know when to change your blade? Well, my answer is going to be another question to you, and that is, how often do you use your machine? If you are like us and you use your machine every single day, that means you are going to have to change your blade very often, or a lot more often than someone else. Just like with a car, if you drive your car every single day, you're going to need to get the oil changed a lot faster than someone who drives it once a week. So, depending on how much you use your machine, that's going to determine how often you need to change your blade. So if you see that it is not cutting up to your standard, change the blades. Replacement blades are not that expensive, and it's a great way to ensure that you get nice, perfect, clean cuts every single time. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Once again, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell notification so that you can get notified when we get crafty. I also would love to see your comments down below. Tell me which blade that you use the most, or which one you think you would use rather than a fine point blade. I want to hear your answers. I'd love to hear feedback from you guys. So make sure you drop us a comment down below and tell us what is your favorite blade to use with your Cricut machine. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope that you all have learned everything you need to know about all of the Cricut blades. If you've liked this video, check out this one.